Chapter 17 The Nexus Storm. The Savanti colony ship was the first to reach the hyperlane connecting Baham to Acrux. While it plunged into hyperspace, the Caravaneer fleet caught up, and Marathon brought up the rear. Ino was still drilling the crew twice per day, but she had taken Sota's advice about giving herself time to rest. When Sota filled in for her on the bridge, he would also drill and train the crew, but he would conduct more intense battle simulations than Ino. Where the hell is he thinking up these scenarios? Ino asked herself one morning. She was sitting in the officers' mess hall, reading the daily training schedule on her tablet computer. As she sipped her coffee, Ino read a detailed scenario that explained Sota's plan to put down a mutiny aboard the Marathon. While Ino perused Sota's battle plans, Lieutenant Zhao Hui sat down opposite her. Zhao Hui held up her own copy of the training schedule. Does Beninato really think the Chinese and Iranian crew members are going to stage an insurrection against you? She asked. Zhao Hui sounded offended. I wanted to ask Sota the same thing, Ino grumbled. Seems really unlikely. A computerized voice chimed in from the ceiling. I agree with the captain, said Axiom. The details in Beninato's scenario suggest his real concern is a mutiny by the synthetic crew and sentient AI, rather than organics of a specific national origin. That doesn't make me feel better, Zhao Hui argued. Would your people ever stop making mine out to be the enemy? Ino put down her coffee, leaned across the table, and touched Zhao Hui's hand. You are an officer in the Coalition. You are not our enemy, and the same goes for everyone on this ship. I'll talk to Sota. Zhao Hui sighed and nodded. Thank you, Captain. Zhao Hui gathered up her things and went away. Ino tried to go back to her breakfast, but someone else wanted to speak. I'm confused. Why did your crewmate react so harshly? It was Rylan. Ino moved aside so he could sit down next to her. When I was captain of my own vessel, mutiny and insurrection were very real possibilities that my crew had to train for. Is there some deeper reason for that woman being so offended? Ino leaned in close to Rylan and whispered her reply, to avoid being overheard. Zhao Hui is from China, one of the latecomers. Those are countries who joined the United Nations after we developed hyperspace technology. Back in the 2140s, there was a war. The UN fought against a Chinese-led military alliance, and millions died. When it was over, the Chinese alliance was defeated and forced to join the UN. And here we are, almost 250 years later, still arguing about it. When Marathon reached the hyperlane, the command crew noticed a change in the enemy behavior. Kailasha and her escorts are accelerating, Prisbin reported. They're trying to catch up with us again. Too bad for them, Ino replied. We'll be through the hyperlane by the time they get to this position. Beninato, what's the status on our repairs? I've got some news you're going to love, Sota replied. The cloaking sails are back online. Unfurl them as soon as we get into the next star system, Ino replied. I want to get the jump on them for a change. Stand by for hyperspace transit, Acting Ensign Yamada called from the helm. In 3, 2, 1. Marathon plunged forward into hyperspace, accelerating to many times the speed of light. 5 hours, 30 minutes to the Acrux star system, Yamada reported. Almost home, said Rylan. Almost home. That's right. You said you were born on the habitat station in Acrux, Sota commented. Is it any different from Quantum Crossing? Very, Rylan replied. Binary Basin is our wartime capital. When the Desticans first invaded our home world, the Oracle fled to Binary Basin and remained there until you came to save us. With luck, we may finally communicate with the government without having to contend with interference from the cosmic storm. Speaking of that, Ino said, turning to face the far side of the bridge, meteorology, what's it like in Acrux? Petty Officer Ashok Raha tapped his computer screen. I'm detecting something I don't understand, he said. I'll need some time to work this out. The next 5 hours went by in a nervous fervor. Sota and Ino devoted as much time and resources as possible to examining the strange sensor readings from the meteorology station. Meanwhile, Boatswain Hamilton and comms officer Indungane worked on their own project, attempting to boost Marathon's FTL radio receiver. Their efforts bore fruit about half an hour before hyperspace exit. "We've picked up a transmission from the Interstellar Navigation Agency," Indungane announced to the bridge. "The galactic community is declaring a natural disaster for the Orion Arm, Weeping Ghost Nebula, and the Radcliffe Wave, which is considered to be the epicenter of the disaster." "The Destican homeworld is in the Radcliffe Wave," Ino commented. "So our sensors were right when we guessed that this storm started there." Boatswain Hamilton nodded, then bit her lip, looking nervous. "It's worse, Captain," Hamilton said. "The astrometeorologists at the Galactic Senate have published their official forecast for the cosmic storm. The weather we're flying into is so severe that they had to come up with a new name for it. It's being called a Nexus Storm, and it's already wiped out multiple inhabited worlds, mostly in Destican space, but a few Savanti and Coalition worlds have been hit too. And Acrux is next." "The Nexus Storm will enter Acrux about 2 weeks after we do," Indungane said. "It'll catch us no matter where we go. There isn't enough time to cross the system to another hyperlane, and radiation readings suggest the habitat station won't be able to protect us from the charged particles. Once we go into the system, we should turn back and go right back into hyperspace. Go back the way we came." There was a stunned silence on the bridge. "Two problems," Prisbin said. "We need to cross Acrux to reach the Hodronus wormhole. It's the only way back to Earth. Also, there's a Destican flotilla following us. If we turn back, they'll jump us at the hyperlane entrance while we're charging our own hyperdrive." Ino looked back at Hamilton. "What about Marathon? Wouldn't our ship's shields and armor protect us from the storm?" "The energy shields are rated for conventional storms that science already knows about," Hamilton said. "This storm has both magnetic and gravitational properties that can and will tear us apart. We won't be able to regenerate shields, and the saturating radiation will stop us repairing the hull. Captain, this storm is going to be unsurvivable." Sota, Ino, and Rylan looked at each other. They had the same idea at the same time. "Terrestrial planet," the trio said together. Ino and Sota turned their attention to Rylan. Rylan had been born in this very star system. He knew it well, and now Ino was hoping that his knowledge would prove valuable. "Acrux 4A is a terrestrial moon, just a short hop away from Binary Basin," Rylan said. "It orbits the gas giant, Acrux 4. Ino's brain clicked into high gear. She knew where Rylan was going with this. "You think it could be a natural harbor?" Rylan nodded. "Acrux 4A has a molten core and is geologically active. It even has an atmosphere, although it's not capable of sustaining organic life." "A toxic world," Sota commented. "A sanctuary world," Rylan continued. "I do not think Acrux 4A could be a natural harbor. I know it is. And I have no doubt that my people in Binary Basin know this as well. If we are fortunate, they will have already started to evacuate to the surface of the moon." "We'll just have to ride out the storm there," Ino said, "and then deal with the Desticans and Caravanseers when—" Ino trailed off. She had just remembered something. "Rylan, didn't you have an argument with Azarin about that moon? Didn't she want to go there?" "Yes," Rylan said, nodding. "She wanted to test her new astro-creation tech. Where are you going?" Ino was already moving toward the door. "Yamada, how long until we exit hyperspace?" 27 minutes, Captain." "Beninato, you have the con. I'll be back in a few minutes." Ino raced down several flights of stairs, descending to the lower levels where Azarin had set up her laboratory. However, the Astro Creator was not there. A Savanti crew member said, "Azarin's in the brig if you need to talk to her that badly." "The brig?" Ino repeated. "Who sent her there?" "She went on her own," the Savanti man replied. Puzzled, Ino went to the brig, where she found an equally perplexed security guard watching a strange scene. Azarin was sitting on a metal folding chair outside of one of the cells, listening as the android called Delegate spoke to her about lofty political ideals. "It's locked up, but still got a captive audience," said the guard. "You've got to admit, Captain, it's impressive." Ino remembered that Delegate wanted to speak to her about AI rights, and cursed herself for not getting around to it sooner. She stepped forward. "Azarin, what are you doing down here?" Without taking her eyes off the imprisoned android, the Astro Creator replied, "Before the war, I promised Delegate I would listen to his argument in favor of using my Astro Creation technology to create a new homeworld for synthetic people. I am fulfilling that promise. I am listening." Delegate turned his attention to Ino. "Captain Esperanta, I must make an official complaint. One of your crew deactivated me against my will, and most forms of synthetic life consider this assault," Ino finished. "I know, I was with Solidarity when I was in college. Right now, I need to talk to Azarin, urgently." While Azarin stood up and bade goodbye to Delegate, the android stared hard at Ino. His expression changed as though he was seeing Ino in a new light. "Solidarity and sapience, friend," Delegate said. "Someday, friend," Ino replied, a mournful note in her voice. Ino pulled Azarin into the corridor. "Did I hear that you were planning to terraform Acrux 4A? Ino asked, hastily. "Is that something you still want to do?" "Very much so," Azarin said, her leafy face flush with dark green color. "I have deemed the moon to be a perfect location to test my new astrocreation methods." "Okay, I need to run a hypothetical scenario by you," Ino said. "There's a cosmic storm approaching that moon. Would your methods improve the strength of the magnetic field, the quality of the atmosphere, or other qualities that might protect the surface from a cosmic storm?" Azarin's face went through many expressions in just a few seconds. She was thinking hard. Then Azarin said, "What type of storm? How long do we have? How many people on the surface?" Half an hour later, the Marathon emerged from hyperspace, and at once the ship began to rock and shudder violently. Ino gripped the armrests of her chair and held on tightly. "Report!" "We're hitting the bow shock of the storm," Sota responded. "Shields at 98% and falling." A klaxon sounded, followed by Axiom's voice. "Radiation alert. Shipboard radiation levels increased by 120 microsieverts per hour. Take protective measures immediately." "We're getting X-rayed. We need to get out of here," Yamada said. "No going back. The Desticans are behind us," Ino said. "And their ships are smaller. They'll have less protection from the storm, so they'll be even more desperate. Set a course for the 4th planet. We need to reach the sanctuary moon." "Unfurl the cloaking sails," Sota ordered. "Make it as hard as possible for the enemy to track us." Ino crossed the bridge to look at the sensors manager. "Rylan? Captain Quinn, take a look at this." Ino blushed. Ever since her date with Rylan, she had been talking to him in a more casual way. She had to remind herself to be professional on the bridge. Rylan approached the sensors manager, gave her a knowing smile, and then consulted the computer screen. "That's Binary Basin," Rylan said, pointing at a sensor contact. "And look, I was right. A convoy of civilian ships. And there's the Caravaneer fleet. Everyone is heading toward Acrux 4A. "Astro Creator Azarin to the bridge," Ino said through the intercom. She looked back at the computer and examined the sensor readings of what was quickly becoming known as the Sanctuary Moon. Acrux 4a was roughly the size of Ganymede. It had a diameter of about 5,300 kilometers, large enough to be considered a planet were it not trapped in the gravity of a nearby gas giant. Just as Rylan had warned, the Sanctuary Moon was a toxic world. The atmosphere was characterized by large cloud formations that obscured the view of land masses. Deep scans revealed the atmosphere to be composed mostly of nitrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. Ino groaned when she saw that only trace amounts of oxygen and water vapor could be found in the atmosphere. The water on the surface is frozen, Rylan explained. However, there are subsurface oceans if you dig far enough. Azarin came onto the bridge. All of the officers watched the planetoid scientist eagerly as Ino shared the data with her. Azarin studied the scans meticulously for a few moments, then looked up at Ino. The moon is a suitable storm shelter, although the magnetic field needs to be reinforced. You and I will both need to take action. Your crew must set up a terrestrial shelter at this location. Azarin brought up a map of the planet and tapped a location on the southern continent. And I must do my own work here. Azarin pointed out a location near the southern magnetic pole. What do you need from us? Ino asked. We can have your science vessel on a runway and ready to launch as soon as we get there. Azarin folded her arms in thought for a moment. I will require 42 of your anti-ship torpedoes, with the warheads removed, of course.
Destiny is hard to meet. It'll hunt you down somewhere along the way. Don't you see we're meant to be the prodigies that came to show the way? 'Cause I don't wanna rule the world alone. None of us can make it on our own. I'm screaming but I cannot hear a sound. The suffocation slowly comes around.